afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's GIC Talk. My name is Juyeon, the host of today's GIC Talk. Before we get started, please turn off your cell phone or put it on silent mode. Thank you. Data on community needs and opinions of current GIC programs are needed in order for the GIC to grow as a community organization. Recently, the GIC completed an online survey for sustainable development. Today's topic is evaluating surveys. Speaker Joel Keralis, previous GIC International intern, will discuss this survey project from July, designed to evaluate the scope of GIC members, the public and GIC staff members. If you have any questions, please write them down on the small sheet of paper that you were given when you first arrived. Then one of our GIC volunteers will collect it from you. Joel will be answering these questions during the Q&A portion, which is led by one of our English volunteers. Now, without any further hesitation, please welcome Joel with a big round of applause.
Hello.
Hello.
As I was just introduced, my name is Joel Keralis, and I'm happy to see all of you here today. We are just coming off of a break on the GIC Talk series, so some of our regulars haven't been able to come for the last few weeks because there were no talks. And as we continue back with the GIC Talk series, hopefully we'll have more and more people coming again. But it is good to see all of you here today. So a little bit about me first. I was a GIC intern this summer, and I'm a current graduate student at the University of Texas. I actually did my undergraduate at Texas A&M, and so if you know anything about American university politics, the two schools actually rather hate one another. So I'm one of the very few that went from Texas A&M to the University of Texas. My current program, I'm in a dual master's degree there, with a master's in international relations and a second master's of arts in Asian studies. And both of my degrees focus on East Asia, particularly Korea. So that's why I'm here for the summer to work for the GIC. But I actually spent some time here as an English teacher. I was a Hagwon teacher here in Gwangju for 2 years, between 2012 and 2014. And that was when I first got to know the GIC. I was a GIC member for a while I was here as a teacher. And then I returned to the United States for my graduate school. But I was fortunate to come back here and to be a graduate intern at the GIC. But my perspective for the survey project comes from both my time as a GIC member and as an intern at the GIC. But the reason that I wanted to do this kind of a research project was because while I was a GIC member, I learned a lot about the types of programs and activities that the GIC does. But some of my friends who I knew could benefit from the GIC did not know much about the programs that were available. And so I wanted to help the GIC to understand what people know about their programs so that they can better reach the people in the community that these programs can help. And so this topic sounds a little bit boring because we're talking about numbers and data, and it's not maybe the world's most interesting subject, but it can be interesting when you think about how those numbers apply to the GIC and what they mean. It's very important as we look at these numbers to think about how they can help the GIC. Numbers are most useful to guide our decision making. While a number by itself doesn't mean anything, if we look for patterns, then they can help us to make the best decisions as a staff and organization, and also try to use these numbers to improve the programs and services that we provide to the community. And I want to think a little bit about the GIC members. Hopefully most of you are GIC members, And when you think of the GIC as an organization, most people just think of the staff and the volunteers that work inside. But I want you to think of yourselves as members, actually as a type of stakeholder in the organization. Without the members, the GIC doesn't have a reason to exist. We can have programs, but the programs are for the members, not for the staff. And you as members have a stake and interest in making the GIC a better place so that we can all have this community that will make a better city for everyone in Gwangju. So right now, the GIC has some internal numbers, some statistics or records from your membership and from the events that we do. But these numbers aren't always very complete because it depends on the program or the coordinator to keep track of their records for their program. And there is no complete database that has all of the information about the members or about what happens on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis in the GIC. If we have better numbers, we can actually look at different things like how many people are coming to specific events over time and look at the type of people that are coming. Because if you look in the room, all of you are very different. We have people of many different ages, nationalities, and all of you have different interests, but you all decided to come today. So we need to look at why people come to certain events so that we can have the best events for those people when they're interested in helping the GIC or participating in the community. We can also look at these numbers for trends to see what programs have the most appeal to certain people, and also to look at where we need to go in the future as an organization. Next, please. So, hopefully most of you participated in the survey. It was last month in early July. And so we had a couple different goals at the beginning. The main goal was to get information from both GIC members and people in the community that are not currently GIC members. In order for the GIC to grow, it needs to have appeal to both people inside the organization and people outside. If you are not a member, we need to give you a reason to become a member. But we also have to know what people who are not GIC members know in order to be able to communicate with them. So if you have not been to the GIC, maybe you've heard some things about the programs, and in order for us to get people to come to the GIC Talk, to visit the GIC, to participate, they need to know. And many people in Gwangju know about the GIC, but we don't know how much or what they know. So this survey, when we ask questions of people who are not members, helps us to understand what they know about the programs. We also want to know specifically what people think about the programs. What programs are good? What programs maybe need a little improvement? And so these numbers can help us to see what we are doing well and what things we can improve. But it also just tells us a lot about the community. We have, like I said, many different programs, and not every program is of interest to every person. Some of you like to come to the GIC Talk, and you like to learn about things. Other people really want to come to the GIC to learn languages, whether that is to practice English or Korean, or maybe something completely different like the Latin classes that were offered recently. But other people really just want to come and maybe borrow some books from the library. So we need to know who is interested in what program so that we can help to reach out to the people that are most likely to need that program. So the survey was done online, and I chose to use SurveyMonkey as the platform. It is one of the most common online survey platforms where you can create questions and have people answer the survey on the internet, and then it creates a database with all of the response information that can easily be analyzed using computer software like Microsoft Excel or Stata. And we ran the survey for 2 weeks in July, and we actually got a lot of responses. So we're going to talk a little bit here in the next few slides about what some of the responses were and what data we actually got from this. Next, please. So one thing that I wanted to do was to compare the numbers from my survey with the numbers that we do have about GIC members. One thing that was very clear was that a lot of GIC members are female. And so that can help us to look at maybe what programs people are interested in or how people are going to network. But basically you can see from the numbers that we had a majority of female respondents, which is similar to what the GIC records are for members. But as we're going to see in a couple slides, the survey responses included a large section of non-GIC members, and so it is interesting to see that the responses in the survey, even including people outside the GIC, were a similar proportion to the numbers that we have for GIC members. And then another thing we want to look at is nationality. And part of this relates to the languages that we both use for the survey and for GIC programs. Right now, the only two major language offerings that we have for GIC programming are things in Korean and in English. But the English-speaking population of foreigners in Gwangju is actually much smaller than some of the other ethnic communities, whether that's Chinese or Vietnamese. And so in the long run, the GIC might want to consider looking to expand some of its program offerings into languages outside of just English and Korean. While that is not something that I'm going to discuss in detail, understanding where people come from helps us to know more about what languages they speak and how we can relate to them. So if you see the numbers, the orange lines are for the GIC's data on international members, and the red lines are the responses that I got from the survey. There are more GIC members, international members, than I actually had for responses on the survey. So it's natural to see those numbers a little bit different, like a little larger for internal GIC members. But you can see that we have a very wide variety of people that are both GIC members and community members that are outside of just the GIC. We had over 20 different countries represented in the survey sample. And so, of course, the largest ones that we saw were from the United States. The numbers actually go way up here if you were to expand all the way up to the 90 or 60 members that we had total. But we also have a good variety of people from basically every continent represented here. Europe, South America, Africa, North America, and many different countries in Asia. So we do have a very diverse population, and it's going to be very helpful for us to try and think about the variety of people when we design our programs. One thing that I'm going to touch on a little later in the presentation is how these demographics are changing too. Because as the GIC grows and creates new programs, they have to keep in mind that the numbers of people from different areas and different languages will change over time. The numbers that we have for different countries today will be different next year or the year after. Maybe there will be more people from certain countries and fewer people from maybe the United States. Many of the Americans that are here right now are English teachers, and the market for English teachers in Gwangju and in Korea in particular has changed a lot. So as we expect numbers to change in the future, we can use this to think about what programs we design and who we want to come to our programs. Next, please. Another thing that we need to think about when designing programs is the age of the individuals that are coming. You can see from the Korean GIC numbers here that the majority of our members for the Korean GIC members are actually above the age of about 40. We don't have particularly accurate numbers for the international members of the GIC, but then you can see on the survey data on the left that the numbers for the total survey, which includes a lot of international residents, skews more towards the younger end of the spectrum. But when we are looking for programs, it's something to consider whether or not you are targeting a younger demographic or older demographic, and also how you reach out to people in these generations. One thing that the GIC has experimented with in the last year is the GIC Trek. And things like hiking or tour activities might be more interesting or more accessible to people in a specific age group. And so we can use the age data in comparison with the interest areas in the programs, as I'm going to discuss later, to know specifically which programs are best for which group, which age group, or even which nationality, like we talked about before. But this also highlights one of the needs for more accurate GIC data inside the organization. Because I was able to get numbers for the age distribution of GIC Korean members, but not for international members. And so if we're going to look at these trends over time, it helps to have better data and more complete data. One small mistake that I admit making in my survey was not consulting the internal numbers early enough, because I used different age ranges for my survey than the age categories that we use inside the GIC. So in the future, we need to try and make sure that they match up. Rather than going 10 or younger, 20 or younger, 30 or younger, I went for 24 or younger and then on a 5-year increment from there. So these are just little things that you learn as you look at the more complete data picture. But all of these numbers on demographics can be applied to the specific interests and experience data that we're going to see in a few minutes. Next, please. So, as I said, we wanted to talk to both GIC members and GIC non-members. This gives us the breakdown of respondents between current members, former members, and people that have never been a member of the GIC. The red bar shows all responses in both the Korean and international groups. And so you can see that the majority of the respondents were actually current GIC members at 120. We had a total response of about 240, so half of them were actually current GIC members. But the other half were not currently GIC members. And so we need to look at why people are moving away from the GIC if they have been a member, or what reasons people have for never being a member in the first place. Next, please. So I asked people what their reason was for joining the GIC, and the most common responses for why they joined were these three at the top. Many people came to the GIC because they want news and information, and that is something that we try to provide to our members through the Gwangju News, and also regular updates on social media, such as the Facebook and Twitter accounts that we run. And also through other publications like the newsletter. But basically we want people to know about the community so that they can come and participate. So if news is important, then it should be reflected in the programs that reflect things like the Gwangju News and whether or not people are actually paying attention to this news and information. Another very common response was people that wanted to support the international community. And I think that it's very good that there are people here in Gwangju that care about building a diverse, international, multicultural community. And we aim to continue to provide that kind of diverse community as we reach out to people from many different countries. And then the final one, for the most popular reasons for joining, was actually on the recommendation of a friend, which is a good way to get people in through networking but I think this also might be one of our weaknesses when it comes to program knowledge, as I will talk about later on. Because if you get someone to join because they're a friend of you as a member or a friend of a staff member, they will join and we can have them as a member, but if their interest is tied to a specific person that is also a member or on a staff member, if that other member leaves, we need to make sure they have a reason to stay. Then reasons for leaving the GIC, for not renewing their membership, were these ones here at the bottom. The most common one was listed as moving away. I don't know if that means moving to a different part of Gwangju, or moving to a different part of Korea, or moving out of Korea in total. I know that some respondents completed the survey after they had left Korea to move to a different country, especially some of the international responses. And my data does not show where these people are now, but we need to know if people moving within the city in particular are moving away and not wanting to come to the GIC because of distance, or is it just that in a transition they stopped renewing their membership status or whatever. We can't stop people that are moving though. So if people move, we lose the membership. That's not really anything we can do about it. Some of these others are more problematic. The second most common reason for leaving the GIC was that they didn't use the services that the GIC provides. If you're paying for a membership and you're not using anything in the GIC, well, that's a problem for us because we are not encouraging you to come and use our services. If you didn't use it because there wasn't anything that we could offer to you, then that's bad. But I don't think that's ever the case. I think that the GIC has some kind of service that is good for just about everyone in the community. The problem is that most people don't know about the specific services that are available. And so we need to do a better job of communicating the programs and events that we have to our members so that we have members that stay and want to continue to be involved. And the final one that was mentioned several times for leaving the GIC was that the membership was too expensive. That was also a common note on why people did not join the GIC at all. And that is something that we will have to look at as a staff and see if there's ways that we can either adjust membership benefits and fees accordingly. But if we want to recruit members, you need to have an affordable membership, but you also need to have value that matches the membership fee. And that's one thing that I think that we need to do a better job of communicating. The value is there, but if people don't know about it, then they're not going to understand that they should be coming in and participating in our products. Next slide, please. So once we look at non-member justification, so these are people that were never GIC members. They know about the GIC because they completed this survey, so they know at least something. But they've given a reason for why they never joined the GIC in the first place. And I think that a lot of this has to do with us communicating that there is value to justify the service. But if the membership fees are actually prohibitive, then we need to look at better ways to capture people that are interested but can contribute maybe on a slightly lower level, or how we can get people involved where there is a need that they have and there's interest in our programs, but we need to find the way to get in touch with these members or potential members without alienating people just because of a prohibitive price. Some people said the GIC is inconveniently located. I think that the GIC is actually quite easy to get to because we're very close to the subway and downtown. But if you live very far away, such as in Suwon or Gwangsenggu, it can be a long trip. But we also can't really change the location, so there's not much going on there. One reason that a lot of people said for not joining the GIC was because they didn't know much about the GIC. Right now, the GIC relies primarily on word of mouth and social media for advertising. Other forms of advertising are much more expensive, and we don't necessarily have plans to do specific things, but learning how to reach people with the most economical means possible is key for getting this information out to people that might want to be members but just don't know about it. And this is actually one of the more interesting things here. Number 16 in the middle, 16 respondents said that they are not GIC members because they can still participate in most things at the GIC without being a member, such as this talk. If you are here and you are not a GIC member, we are very happy how to encourage people that are casual attenders to convert into actual membership. Because there are many things like the GIC Talks or GIC Day where it's not exclusive to GIC members. I do find it interesting, though, that the two highest categories are kind of opposite. Some people say the GIC is too expensive, and other people say they can do everything for free. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what people are saying as a reason for not joining or joining. And I don't know exactly why people have these opinions, but we're going to look at this hopefully in the future through different iterations of the survey and talking specifically to people that have these concerns. Then 11, I don't need any of the services that the GIC provides. 11 respondents said they don't need GIC. Well, maybe they don't, but again, maybe they do and they just don't know. And then we had a couple other responses, but really, I found it very interesting that the two biggest ones were fundamentally incompatible. Too expensive and I can do everything for free don't really make sense. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get to the most interesting part of the numbers, which is what programs were considered the best or worst. We rated programs on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is not important to me or the community, and 5 is very important to me or the community. But I also had people answer some questions about what they were familiar with or experienced. Unsurprisingly, many people gave ratings to programs that they admitted they were not familiar with. So if they do not know about the program, they still gave it a rating, which is actually important to us because even if you don't know a lot about the program, not know much about the program, it still tells us what the average person on the street might think if you say, come and do our homestay program. And they think, homestay, is that interesting? Is that not interesting? I don't know. What about if you want to come for Korean classes? Well, that's a little bit more straightforward. But so we have to look at what people who actually don't know about the program think so that you can know how to advertise to people who don't know much about the GIC. But then we can also look at how these ratings change for people that are familiar with the program or have experienced it. And in almost every case, again, not surprisingly, the numbers were the lowest average for everyone, including people who had not experienced or knew anything about the program, but were higher average ratings for people that knew about the program and highest for people that had actually experienced the program. So if you have taken language classes, you're more likely to rate the language classes as being important than people who have never taken language classes and don't know anything about them. So what I cannot tell you about that is whether taking the language classes makes you think that they are more important, or if these people are what we call self-selected. So the people that already think language classes are important are going to take language classes. We don't know if the highest numbers coming from experience is a result of the experience, or just that people with a natural interest are going to do the program. And then each person was asked to rate these programs on 2 levels, both for you personally and for the community as a whole. Because maybe I have studied Korean a lot in university, or I'm Korean, and I don't really think that I need to take Korean classes or even English classes. So language classes aren't an important thing to me. But I really like learning about cultural areas in Jeollanam-do, and I like to socialize, so the GIC tour is very important to me. Or maybe I work every Saturday and cannot go on GIC tours, so that is not important. So like the difference between you and whether or not you think it is important for the community is also important for how we view the average value of the program. And in almost every case, the average of people's responses for you was lower than the average for the community. Which kind of begs an interesting question. If you, as a group, are the community, then is the community perception inflated because you think everyone thinks, oh, well, someone out there wants this, but in reality, none of you want it? That's one thing that these numbers can indicate. If the average for you, personal opinions, on a large number of people is substantially lower than what everyone thinks the community wants, then maybe the perceptions about the community are misguided, and we are giving too much importance to something that nobody actually wants. And then I broke this down into different categories. The community is all of the Korean and international responses. And then there's the breakdown between the two surveys, the Korean survey and the international English survey. And then a final group for staff. And as we go to the next slide, I have a very big spreadsheet with lots of numbers on it. And I just want to talk a little bit about kind of how I looked at these numbers. Each one was broken down based on the number of responses. I know they're very small. These numbers are not important, so don't try to read the numbers. But you see that there are different ratings based on everyone's average assessment of how important the program is for you, and everyone's assessment for how they think the program is for the community. And then what I did is I filtered out all the people who said that they had not experienced or were familiar with the programs, and then took different averages for people that said, I am familiar with the program, or I have experienced the program. And so the number of responses gets smaller each time, because fewer people are familiar with the GIC tour than in the overall sample of ratings. And even fewer people have experienced the GIC tour than the people who say they know about it. But you can see the trend in each one of these categories. Every time you go from community in total to familiar, the numbers go up. And then again, when you go from familiar to experienced. And so I have different categories for all these, and I'm going to actually talk about which ones were the highest and lowest rated. And then we'll talk about how we can apply these numbers with the biographic data from before. Next slide, please. So let's start with the good stuff. The highest rated programs for the GIC were the Gwangju News and the Counseling, Interpretation, and Translation Services. Well, if a lot of people said that they joined the GIC because they wanted news and information, then that means we're doing the right thing with Gwangju News. It was rated as the highest category for 11 of the 24 different categories. And so it had very high ratings overall. The highest overall in any category was for the staff community, staff perception of the community for people that have experienced the Gwangju News. But we also, like I said, had a very high rating for the counseling and interpretation services. I personally think that these two are the most valuable programs that we provide. My very biased opinion. But the Gwangju News is an excellent publication, and a lot of you both enjoy reading it and getting some news from it. And we hope that you continue to enjoy that as one of the services that we provide. But the counseling and interpretation was very highly rated in almost every category, but it actually has some relatively low numbers for understanding and experience. So people that experienced it rated it as very, very good. People that had not experienced it still rated it as important, but we need to find ways to communicate these things to more and more people so that we can boost the number that are actually familiar with the program. Others that were rated very highly were the Gwangju Community Support Project, GIC Day, the language classes, our space rental program, and the Gwangju Guidebook. Now the interesting thing is, a couple of these on the bottom, you're actually going to see on the next slide. Again, next slide please. Now we're looking at things where we have some lower numbers. The two lowest rated programs were the May Concert and the Homestay program. Now it's important for us to remember that these numbers do not mean that a program is bad. These numbers just mean that people indicated that the importance in their perception was lower than some of the other programs. But do keep in mind that on a rating scale that goes from 1 to 5, the average is 3. If it's a totally random assessment, you're going to expect something around 3. And so if it's below 3, like 2.5 or 2.4, that's actually been rated at, on average, of below average importance. It's pretty low given that most people have favorable opinions of a lot of these programs. But these areas, not necessarily bad programs, but are programs that we need to work on advertising more correctly to people. Because even in these categories, you saw very low numbers for the individual perceptions, but as people got to experience the program, the numbers went up still. So I think that if there's more understanding, more experience, then these programs are going to be a little more appealing. Next slide, please. Now, one of the most shocking things that I saw in the data was the average number of programs that people knew about or had experienced. Particularly the second set of numbers for Korean members. This was based on everyone's reporting for how many programs they were familiar with and how many they had experienced, on average over the population. International members were familiar with 6.7 of the 12 programs that we asked about, which actually isn't bad, over half. And especially keep in mind that these numbers did not control for people that are not GIC members. The international respondents were almost half, almost 50% of them were not current GIC members. They'd either never been a member or were a former member, but still on average knew a lot about the GIC. Korean, on the other hand, Korean respondents indicated substantially lower knowledge of programs and a very low number, less than 2 programs experienced. And of the respondents in Korea, over 80% were active GIC members. So many more of the survey responses came from people who are GIC members in the Korean section than in the international section, and yet they have experienced almost half, or lower than half, of the number of programs that the international residents have. And if we are to have an actual community here as an organization, if we are going to have people come in to our organization and feel like they are part of a community, we need to get them to experience a few more programs so that we can actually come together, network, and do things as a community. But in other particularly shocking news, the staff, that is people that work here at the GIC, reported an average of 7.61 programs that they were familiar with. That means that your average staff member does not know about a third of the programs that we offer at the GIC. Let that sink in for a moment. Remember, there were 12 total, and we didn't even get to 8. So how can we as a staff market our programs if we don't even know what we do in the GIC? And this is not just new or more obscure programs like the Gwangju Community Support Project. Out of the 18 staff responses, 4 people indicated that they had not been familiar with, not even familiar, not experienced. The GIC needs an anonymous venue for feedback, where people that have maybe an issue or something really good that happens have a way to talk to us about their concerns, their experiences. While there is some form of communication with our programs, if you're in a Korean language class that only has 4 students, and you have a complaint about the instructor, it's going to be really easy for the instructor to know who gave that complaint. So people aren't very willing to talk to the instructor or about a specific instructor in person when there are such small numbers of people. And you need to have anonymous feedback so people can speak their mind freely. And in a survey like this, you have so many responses. Out of 240 responses, I have no idea who said these things. You know, there's no way that I can tie it to any person. It's very anonymous, and it's easy for people to clearly talk about what they thought was good or bad. And so having a way for people to suggest new programs or more important programs, or give feedback on things that they would like to see happen is also very meaningful for us, because now we know things that are popular that we can expand often. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things that I did not do because of time, but can be done with this, is tie the demographic data to the individual survey responses on programs. That way, with the spreadsheet that I have, and a couple programming commands in Stata, you can look at the responses for the Gwangju tour, the GIC tour, and see where it's most highly related, most highly rated based on age, based on residence, based on whether you're male or female. That way we can know which programs are most important to which people, and we can talk specifically if we know that the GIC tour is very popular with international residents under the age of 40. And whenever we see someone that's a younger international resident come in, we can talk to them, hey, you know, we've got this tour thing, it's really cool. If you know that people that are interested in the GIC Talk maybe fall into a certain age category, then you can talk to them specifically and say, look, we've got some programs that we think you might be interested in. We also need to look at the way things change over time, because programs change, people change, and interest changes. And so if the survey is repeated in the future, we can look at trends in whether this program was rated kind of poorly this year, but now we've really tried to expand our advertising. We've tried to maybe modernize our brochures a little bit. Let's see if that boosts the numbers on either perception or importance. But then finally, we need to look at the demographic change over time. This graph right here, does anyone know what that is? There's no caption on it intentionally. Goes up, goes down. It starts at 2008. This is actually the number of E2 visa holders in South Korea. So as you can see, this is now. That was 2010. And there are actually a lot fewer E2 visa members, E2 visa holders in South Korea than there were 5 years ago. In fact, this is the lowest number of English teachers on E2 visas in South Korea since about 2006, 10 years ago. If the demographics of the community change, we need to know how to change our programs, because we can't focus on a target demographic that is disappearing. And if the GIC is to continue as an important organization, we can't tie ourselves to any one demographic. And we need to anticipate things that are changing in populations of the city. Next slide, please. So it's important to remember that these are just numbers. The numbers themselves do not provide recommendations or even say whether or not something is actually good or bad. That has to come from the staff and the community, because this is an organization for all of us. That's why I want us to think of members as stakeholders. They're not just consumers, they are members of the community. We are all involved in this together, and that's why the survey is so important, because it allows input from you as stakeholder members to contribute to the decision-making of your organization. This is also why repetition is so important. The numbers that we have right now are great, but in 6 months, they're not going to be the same. A year from now, they're not going to be anywhere close to what it is now, because our programs change, our advertising changes, and the community changes. And so we need to think also, both as a staff and as you, a community who has contributed to the survey, what the best way is to try and continue to look at these numbers in the future. What is the best time and way to assess opinions of GIC members and the community so that we know what we can do? What's the best time of year? What is the best medium for advertising? And how can you guys contribute to this in a way that makes it meaningful for everyone? Next slide, please. And finally, these are just my personal recommendations for the GIC based on my observations from the survey and my time here working on the staff. We really need to recognize the diversity of our community. And that diversity needs to be reflected in the programs that we offer. People here have a lot of different interests, and not everybody is going to want to do the same programs. And we don't want everyone to do every program. But we would like everyone to at least be familiar with most of the programs. And so as we learn more about the diversity of our community, we just need to find ways to incorporate that diversity into our programs. The GIC needs to remember the mission of the organization, which is to build community. If we are focused on building the community, then that is the best way to bring people in and provide the best services that we offer. The mission of the organization is of the most importance because if we focus on building a community, then there will always be a reason for the GIC to be here. If we build the community, we can sustain it. If we focus only on sustaining ourselves and not the community, then we lose our mission and the organization is no longer important. And the most important one here, 3 C's. Communicate clearly and carefully. We have a problem with communication if the vast majority of our members are only familiar with 4 out of the 12 major programs that we offer. Especially for people that are outside of the GIC, we talk about programs and we want people to come to them, but if they don't know what the programs are, then we can't actually boost attendance. And we need to communicate within our organization to members in a way so that they actually know how to participate and they know how to invest in the organization. Next one here, tradition. Any organization builds an institutional culture where we do things this way because we've always done it that way. Maybe we've done this program for years and years and years and it's been something that we've done since the beginning. Well, just because we've done it for 15 years doesn't mean we need to keep doing it. So every program should be evaluated in a vacuum without putting significance on it because it's something we did for 10 years. And finally, we are a community. The purpose of the GIC is to build a community, but we are all part of the community. Whether that's staff, volunteers, members, or just guests. And so we need to all work together to be the community that gives purpose to Gwangju and to our organization. That is all for now. We move on to the next slide, and then are there any questions?